It's official, Tom Perez is a candidate for the 1st Congressional District here in South Carolina. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with him one-on-one. Well, Tom, it is so good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be seen.
You know, I reached out to you actually on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and I had to do a double take because I just realized that Congressman Sanford was just reelected last year, and now you want to take over his seat in 2018. Tell me why Tom Perez, why now?
Well, it's a two-part question. So the first part, why Tom Perez, I guess we can start with my resume.
Okay.
So I spent 22 years in the military. 22 years in July will be my 22nd anniversary. And I started in submarines and spent 8 years on active duty. And was deployed 3 times. I'm currently an information warfare officer in the reserves. And information warfare is kind of an umbrella term. We do the intelligence, the information technology, and cyber warfare for the Navy. That's on the military side of my resume. On the civilian side, I've spent 10 years at the Department of Defense, 8 years right here at Space War Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
I was a defense acquisition professional. I was a contracting officer's representative. I was an information technology specialist working on submarine communications. And what does all that word suit mean? It basically means I know how the defense budget really works from the inside. I work in the deck plates. I know how working capital funds operate. I know what we can increase and what we can decrease. And I think I have that breadth of experience that will serve this community very well. Because as you know, the defense industry is the largest employer in the district.
Sure.
But beyond defense, I'm the son of 2 teachers. And so education is something that's incredibly important to me. I watch my parents suffer and work really hard just to try to provide a quality of life for their children that they thought was worthy of us. And my mother has a PhD in English, and she would rather have taught, but she ended up having to take a job at the State Department of Education in Louisiana because it paid better. And my father had to move to Saudi Arabia to teach English as a second language because it paid better, so he could pay my sister's college education. And I don't want our teachers to have to deal with that. They should be able to make enough money, more than enough money, to provide the quality of life for their children. And so that's the why. Why now? Because we have a new president and a new Secretary of Defense, and they want to rebuild our military. And we need somebody in our district who will work in lockstep with our president and with General Mattis to do that and to help bring some of those defense industry jobs back here to the Low Country.
You talk about the education. Let me ask you this. What is the state of the education right now in your mind?
In my mind, it is very polarized. If you look just in Mount Pleasant where I live, we have some of the best schools in the state and some of the worst schools in the state. And we see right now the big discussion topic is with school choice.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of an umbrella term. There's kind of 3 flavors essentially for school choice. So you have the districting issue where kids can choose to switch districts, and we have the voucher program where kids can go to private schools if they so choose. Oh, yeah. And then there's the one to build more charter magnet schools. And those are all good ideas. There's a lot of validity to those ideas. However, it still doesn't solve the problem of the underperforming schools. You still have a lot of schools that will be underperforming. And also it'll take kids out of those underperforming schools and put them into the higher performing schools, and those schools will become overloaded. And we're already seeing that happen where people move into school districts for those schools. My daughter goes to Laurel Hill, and there are 16 kindergarten classes in one school. And so if we start to allow other kids from outside the district to move in, that problem will become compounded. So what I want to do is across the board increase teachers' pay.
Okay.
I think that will help us to recruit and retain better teachers, and that will raise the status, the standard of education across the board. Because regardless of whether you have a chalkboard, a whiteboard, or a smartboard, the person standing in front of it is the most important person. And we got to have good quality teachers, and I think that will help to raise the standard of education across the board.
Describe to me the following one word: Betsy DeVos.
One word? I don't know about one word. I can say that she did not interview very well. She comes with very high recommendations. Tim Scott is someone I have the utmost respect for, and if he vouches for her, a lot of times that's good enough for me. But I have to call a spade, and she is. If I'm looking at this from an aspect of I'm hiring her as my Secretary of Education. She could have done better in the interview process. I have high hopes that she will perform better in the actual job than she did in the interview process, but she got confirmed today, having to have the Vice President give the deciding vote. So like I do for everybody who's put in that kind of position, I start on day one, you have a blank slate, let's see what you do from here.
The hiring freeze.
I'm not a big fan of anything that is across the board like that, because and we've seen the president actually walk back some of that, which wisely so. I commend him for doing that. Namely, the doctors at the VA, the nurses at the VA, certain cybersecurity positions, and that affects us right here in the Low Country because Spayward does a lot of the cybersecurity work with the Navy. So that's kind of how I feel about those kinds of hiring freezes.
Judge Neil Gorsuch.
Constitutional stud, if that's a good way to put it. He's a good pick. I think that's, so 2 words.
Sure.
Good pick.
Okay. Matt Moore. As you know, the South Carolina GOP chair will not seek a 3rd term coming May. And you actually said this on Facebook, quote, "Fair winds and falling seas, Matt. Tell me, what will the future of the South Carolina GOP party look in your mind?"
I think we have a bright future ahead. Matt left us better off than he found us. I've talked to Matt a couple of times. He's a smart guy. I believe his trained in engineering from Georgia Tech, if I'm not mistaken. Smart guy, very analytical. I think I've already seen Drew McKenzie. I think he's thrown his hat in the ring. I think he would be a good pick. But I think that we have a bright future ahead of us.
The government. You said the following quote, "I believe that our government's job is to defend the shores, deliver the mail, and get out of the way. Defending the shores being paramount. That is the one common factor that brought the Federalists and Anti-Federalists to the bargaining table in order to create our government to begin with." You said that our government's job is basically to defend the shores, deliver the mail, and get out the way. Defending the shores being paramount. What else?
Well, the government is there. That's obviously a term that I've stolen a number of times. You've heard that phrase a number of times. But basically what it means is that the government, we need to have a limited government. And the government is there to solve big problems. Fighting war, pandemics, regulating interstate commerce, the big problems. And to be able to reduce some of the other areas where they really they shouldn't be too much involved. And so that's kind of what I was trying to get across in that statement. And what we're seeing right now is, speaking of defense spending, right now defense spending is about 4% of GDP. Of our gross domestic product, we're spending 4% on defense. If you take our DoD budget and our Department of Homeland Security budget, and combine them, that's 16% of the overall budget. We spend 28% on healthcare. And so I'm not advocating for a doubling or even tripling of the defense budget. That's not at all. I want to approach the budget with the scalpel, not with the meat cleaver. And we can reduce some areas while increasing other areas, but with an overall decrease in the footprint of the government.
Let's stay on the military, because I know that you would love to work with President Trump, that is, to rebuild our military, because recent defense spending cuts, as you said, have made our shores vulnerable to attack. Tell me, how would you rebuild our military?
Well, for starters, we have incredibly aging infrastructure. We have 30-year-old airplanes. The USS Dallas, which was featured in the Hunt for October, it's still in commission. It was commissioned in 79. Kilo was 1974. I was born in 1976, just to give you an idea, and I'm 40 years old. So we need to start replacing some of these aging infrastructure and weapons. 60 Minutes did a special on our missile silos, and they showed they're still using the old 5-inch floppy drives for their technology. We need to start replacing some of this stuff because it's so obsolete that we have to pay contractors special extra money to make this stuff because they don't want to make it anymore because no one else uses it except the Department of Defense. This is some of the areas I think we can address.
And everyone's using the USB drive now.
Yeah.
Our economy. To many people, the defense spending cuts have also affected the economy here in Charleston. When you look at our economy, what sticks out to you?
Well, on the positive side, we've seen a much more diverse economy. We're seeing a lot more of the knowledge-based jobs with the Silicon Harbor Initiative and the Digital Corridor. And there's actually a great demand for those kinds of jobs. I was speaking with the chairman of the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce, and he owns a technology company. And he was saying that there are more positions than we have people right now. And we're having to work with the universities and even start to bring people from outside because there's such a job growth. That's a good problem to have. In the defense sector, the problem that we've seen with the cuts, particularly with sequestration, is we've seen a marked decrease in the direct investment that SPAWAR has into the local economy. SPAWAR is a research and development agency, and they work predominantly off of the base budget, which took the brunt, actually all of the sequestration hits. And from 2011 to 2016, that number has decreased by $1.6 billion. And we felt that here in the economy. When I worked at SPAWAR as a government employee, I actually got furloughed for 7 days as a government employee. But most of those cuts that we've seen have been to the defense contractors. And there's companies that range the gamut from these little small mom and pop companies all the way up to the large businesses. And my current job, I'm a business development analyst and consultant. I work with defense contractors to help them get business and develop their companies. And just yesterday I was working with a guy, he's one guy, and he's starting his business. And those are the kind of companies that we need to help, we need to encourage. And I think that with a little bit more help from defense spending, and we hope to see that with General Mattis and President Trump, that we can start to rebuild some of what we've lost in the past couple of years.
Speaking of which, President Donald Trump, obviously he's been the 45th president, that is, for the past 2 weeks. How would you describe him right now?
Decisive, in a word. He's definitely backed up all of his campaign promises, whether you like them or not. You can say that he's fulfilling his campaign promises. He gets in there, he makes a decision, and he goes with it. But I'll say this, though, that to his credit, that a lot of times when he makes a decision like we just talked about, the hiring freeze, he's quick to recognize sometimes that we make a decision and then we can make small adjustments as we go along. I think that shows a good command of leadership and a good decision-making process.
You talked about your professional experience in the beginning of this particular interview, but obviously we know that you're a family man as well.
I am.
Let's talk about you as a family man, personally.
Absolutely. Yes, I have a wife. In April, we'll be married for 12 years.
Wow.
And she's from India. Originally, we met in San Diego when I was working for the Defense Department, and I just gotten out of the military. She was getting her master's in computer science. She works at Boeing now as an IT project manager. We have 2 little girls, Ava and Juliana. Ava, of course, goes to Laurel Hill, as I mentioned, and Juliana just turned 1.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is.
Well, Tom Perez, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Likewise.